They had crossed the Atlantic in the bellies of Liberty ships, crammed together, sick with seasickness and uncertainty. The war had already taken everything from them, comrades, homes, illusions of victory, and now they were prisoners in the hands of an enemy they had been taught to despise. When the ships finally docked and the men were herded into trucks bound for inland America, most expected humiliation, perhaps even cruelty. Instead, they found themselves deposited in camps with wooden barracks, orderly fences, clean bedding, and meals that, while modest, were far better than what many had eaten in the field during the last months of the Reich. But the true shock came not from the food or the barracks. It came when the American officers made an announcement that left the Germans staring in disbelief. Every prisoner would be allowed to write letters home. For men who had been raised on propaganda about the inhumanity of the enemy, this seemed unthinkable. Letters were a luxury reserved for free men, and in Germany, even soldiers at the front often waited months for mail to slip through the chaos of war. The prisoners looked at one another, murmuring in disbelief, some laughing bitterly, convinced it was a cruel joke. Could the Americans really allow captured Germans to reach across the Atlantic and touch their families' lives with words? The thought carried both hope and fear. Hope, because families torn apart by war might finally know that their sons and husbands were alive. Fear, because what if the Americans only used these letters as weapons, twisting them into propaganda, altering the words before sending them onward? The first day in the camp, an American interpreter explained the process. Twice a month, each prisoner would be given sheets of paper and envelopes. The letters would be censored, not to change the meaning, he assured them, but to remove any mention of military details. They would then be passed through the International Red Cross, routed via neutral countries like Switzerland or Sweden, and eventually delivered into the heart of the collapsing Reich. The interpreter's calm tone made the prisoners even more suspicious. Many whispered to each other that no enemy would go through such trouble for men who had fought to kill them. It had to be a trick. Yet the promise lingered in their minds like a spark in the dark. Some thought of wives left behind in bombed-out cities, of mothers who might not even know if their sons were alive, of children who perhaps had never even met their fathers. A few hardened veterans scoffed at the idea, refusing to be duped. But the younger men, the farm boys and students turned soldiers, couldn't hide their yearning. If there was even a small chance that their words might reach home, could they risk staying silent? When the first forms were handed out, the barracks fell into an uneasy hush. Men stared at blank paper as if it were more dangerous than a rifle aimed at them. The act of writing felt surreal. After years of orders barked by officers, of lines memorized from propaganda speeches, here was a chance to speak with their own voices. One man's hand trembled so badly he could hardly hold the pen. Another sat frozen, afraid that any wrong word might bring trouble upon his family. Yet as pens scratched against paper, something stirred in the camp. For the first time since capture, they were no longer faceless soldiers or nameless prisoners. They were fathers, sons, and brothers again, tethered by ink to a life that still waited across an ocean and a war. The guards, standing by with quiet indifference, seemed to confirm the truth. This was not a game. The letters would leave the camp. The prisoners, still doubtful, could not yet believe that their words might truly reach across the Atlantic. But a seed had been planted, and in the weeks to come, it would grow into one of the most unexpected lifelines of their captivity. The following days brought further explanations, delivered with almost bureaucratic precision. An American officer, accompanied by a Red Cross representative, entered the camp and outlined the regulations. Each prisoner was permitted to send 2 letters and 4 postcards per month. The length of each letter could not exceed a single sheet of paper, written on both sides, while postcards had to remain brief. All correspondence had to be in German, clearly legible, and addressed only to immediate family members. No mention of troop movements, no descriptions of camp layout, no political commentary were allowed. Any violation would lead to the letter being crossed out with thick black lines or withheld altogether. The Germans listened in silence, weighing every word. Some prisoners muttered to each other in disbelief. It sounded far too generous, almost absurd. Back home, they knew civilians in bomb-shattered Germany were restricted in what they could write. And here, as captives, they were being granted privileges that seemed unimaginable. A few officers tried to caution the men, whispering warnings that every line was part of an American scheme to make them docile. "Don't trust the paper," one sergeant hissed. "It's bait." Others, however, pointed out that the Red Cross stood behind this system, and even the most hardened cynics recognized that the neutral Swiss had long been regarded as reliable guardians of wartime mail. When the first official writing day came, tables were set up in the mess hall. Prisoners lined up, each handed a thin pencil, a sheet of paper stamped with the Red Cross emblem, and an envelope already marked with the return address of the camp. For some, the sight of official stationery was enough to stir an ache in their chests. A few simply stared at the page, afraid to start. Others wrote cautiously, rehearsing phrases in their minds before letting them spill onto the paper. A typical opening ran along the lines of, "I am alive and in good health. I am treated fairly. Do not worry." It was the kind of formula they thought censors expected. Yet beneath these bland words lay torrents of unspoken emotion. The Americans, watching from the side, noted the mix of suspicion and longing. The act of writing was more than a mechanical task. It was an inner battle. One prisoner later recalled that it felt like walking on thin ice, not knowing whether a single word might doom the letter. Many avoided mentioning the war entirely, focusing instead on memories of home, the apple tree in the garden, the family dog, the sound of church bells in their village. Others tried to offer comfort, assuring their parents that captivity, though humiliating, was not cruel. To them, it felt surreal to confess such things when only months earlier they had been fighting to the last bullet in places like Normandy or the Ardennes. Censors reviewed each page swiftly, striking out forbidden words with neat lines. The Germans watched as their sentences disappeared, yet they also saw that most of the text remained intact. This was the